Okay, we're on the record on State versus Loyd. Mr. Loyd's present with his attorneys. Mr. Loyd remains in custody. He's wearing a long sleeve checked shirt, civilian button down, civilian pants. He does have on shackles and jail shoes, but his feet are underneath the table. They cannot be seen by the jury from any point in the courtroom. Anything we need to address before I bring the jury in?
Not from the state, no.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you. I'll get to this. I'll deal with all that later. All right, let's bring the jury in. State recognized presence of the jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense? All right. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Hope you guys had a good evening. I got your note. I'll get you an answer around lunchtime on that. State's still in the presentation of their case. State, you may call your next witness.
State called Stacy Monroe.
Face the clerk and raise your right hand, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. All right, thank you, ma'am. Have a seat. You can remove your mask while you're testifying. The main choir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Stacy Monroe,
Where do you work?
the Orlando Police Department.
And what do you do for them?
I am a crime scene investigator supervisor.
How long have you been in crime scene investigation?
Approximately 10 years.
And how long have you been the supervisor of that unit?
Approximately 6 months.
Okay. Can you describe for the jury your training and experience that allows you to do that job?
Sure. I have a 4-year degree from the University of Central Florida in criminal justice. I completed our in-house training program, which is approximately 3 to 4 months. And then during my time with the crime scene unit, I have an additional 1,000 hours of training.
Let me direct your attention to January 9th of 2017, about 11 o'clock in the morning. Did you respond to the Royal Oaks apartment complex located at 4745 North Pine Hills Road in Orlando regarding a carjacking that had occurred on a victim named Antoine Thomas?
Yes, sir, I did.
Is that in Orange County, Florida?
Yes, sir.
When you arrived on scene, did you speak with other law enforcement officers there and get briefed about what happened?
Yes, sir, I did.
What was your primary role in this part of the investigation?
It was to document a path of travel of a vehicle.
I'm showing you photograph number 1 of State's 10 already in evidence. Is that the apartment complex generally where the carjacking occurred?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, and when you arrived, did you walk around that apartment complex to look for any evidence of where the vehicle went?
Yes, sir, I did.
What did you notice?
In this particular picture?
No, in generally, when you walked around the area where the carjacking occurred, what did you notice?
So it was a normal apartment complex, and then once I was directed along the path of travel by the detectives on scene, we noticed some tire marks and some damage around the apartment complex to a fence.
Did you document that damage to the grass and the fence?
I did.
Okay. Thank you. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Showing what's been marked as State's Exhibit M for identification. Can you take a look at those photos and tell me if you recognize them?
I do.
How do you recognize them?
These are the photographs that I took at the scene.
Do they fairly and accurately depict the scene and the damage that you just described?
Yes, sir, they do.
This time, State move M is in Mary into evidence is next in line, Your Honor.
All right, these will be received without objection as State's Composite Exhibit number 13, consisting of how many photos?
8 photographs.
8 photographs individually numbered on the back.
May I publish?
You may.
Showing you photograph 1 of this exhibit. What are we looking at here?
This is just further along down the path of travel that was shown to me.
Okay. And as we see a fence in the center of this photograph towards the back, what's behind that fence?
Behind the fence is another apartment complex called Sonoma Village.
Start the number. 13. Okay. And what, do you know the name of that complex?
Sonoma Village.
If you said that, I apologize. Photograph number 2 of States 13. What does this show?
So this is the fence that I spoke about earlier, and you can see some disturbance in the grass and the leaves, and then also a little bit of damage to the fence line.
Okay. If you turn left from the vantage point of the photographer in this picture, what do you see?
More fence line and some parking spaces with a little bit more disturbance.
Okay. Showing you photograph 3 of States 13. Is that what you just described?
Yes, sir, it is.
In the center of this photograph, what do we see about that fence?
The fence itself has been knocked down.
Okay. And what did you notice about the concrete parking stop in the middle of the photograph?
The concrete parking stop has what appears to be some tire marks on it, and it's also pushed out of line from the other parking stops.
Showing you photograph 4.
Leading up to the fence,
Okay. Do you see any more tire marks in this photo?
there is some disturbance in the grass and the dirt, yes, sir.
Okay. And photograph 5 of States 13. What do we see here?
That is the fence, the damage to the fence.
Okay. And is this leading into the adjacent apartment complex, Sonoma Village?
Yes, sir.
Showing you photograph 6 of States 13. What do we see here?
So now you're on the other side in Sonoma Village and more damage to the fence.
Okay. So the Royal Oaks apartment complex is to the left.
If you're looking at the photo, Royal Oaks is to the right, Sonoma is to the left.
Got it. And photograph 7 of States 13. What do we see here?
Continuing down the path of travel where you can see disturbance in the dirt.
And we're still now on the Sonoma Village side of the fence.
Yes, sir.
And photograph 8 of States 13. What do we see here?
This is an additional fence that was damaged, also on the Sonoma Village side.
Okay. Did the damage to the fences look fresh?
It did.
And what makes you say that?
So there was no growth, vegetation growing over the fences. It was laying on top of the dirt and the leaves.
Okay. Are you also aware that surveillance footage was recovered from an apartment on the Sonoma Village side documenting a vehicle's travel through the damage you just described?
Yes, sir.
At this time, Your Honor, may I publish State's Exhibit 12?
Yes.
And at the top right-hand corner, do we see the car? The video that we just saw is the damage that you saw to the first fence, the tire tracks, the parking stop bar, the second fence, and the third fence consistent with the path of travel we saw the vehicle take in the video.
Yes, sir, it is.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
You may.
Showing list been marked as State's Exhibit I for identification. Do you recognize the area that this exhibit shows?
I do.
What is it?
This is an overall view of the apartment complex.
Okay, and does the exhibit have various red push pins designated on it?
It does.
Are those red push pins consistent with the area where the fence was broken down and damaged?
They are.
And what, for the record, what letters correspond with those red push pins?
C, D, and F.
Okay, does this image fairly accurately depict the location of those fences and the location of the carjacking and the apartment complex that it occurred in?
Yes, it does.
This time, State would move I into evidence is next in line, I believe 14.
Any objections?
No objection.
These will be received without objection as State's Exhibit number 14.
Okay. May I publish?
You may.
Show. Sorry. Okay, showing you State's Exhibit 14. You said this is the Royal Oaks apartment complex as well as the Sonoma Village side?
Correct?
And we have various push pins that are on this exhibit. As far as the fencing that you described, can you point to the jury where those fences were and what push pins you were talking about that designate the fence?
Sure. The fence is going to be marked by C, D, and F.
Okay. And is the push pin with the letter E, the green one, consistent with the location where the surveillance footage we just looked at was taken?
Yes, it is.
There's also a red line. What does that indicate?
The path of travel of the vehicle.
Is that consistent with the video that we just saw?
Yes, sir, it is.
Thank you. Do you need this? Thank you, ma'am. No other questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Lennon? I can't hear you when you're sitting down. What?
I have no questions.
All right, thank you. May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense? Can she be excused?
Yes.
All right, thank you, ma'am. You're free to go. Call your next witness.
State recall Detective Pete Cadiz.
No, he's still under oath. Detective, you remain under oath.
Yes, ma'am.
You can take your mask off, please. You may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Cadiz, when you testified yesterday, you told us about the initial investigation that you conducted back on January 9th of 2017. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And just to sort of briefly recap, you described
Overruled, go ahead.
During the course of your testimony, you described, at the end of your testimony, you described going to, or units, or officers going to the Royal Oaks apartment complex in reference to a shooting involving a Orange County Sheriff's Deputy or Captain Joseph Carter. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And there was also the investigation of a carjacking.
Yes, sir.
Did the search for Mr. Loyd continue past when he was last seen at the carjacking?
Yes.
Did you receive word just before 8 a.m. that morning that some patrol deputies had located what they believed to be was Antoine Thomas's vehicle?
Yes, I did.
And can you tell us, if you know the address or at least the apartment complex, where the vehicle was found?
It was Brookside Apartments, which is the 5,000 block of Cinder Lane Parkway.
Yeah. Do you know approximately how far that apartment complex is from Royal Oaks?
If you drive lawfully, it's a couple of miles. If you drive through backyards, it's fairly close.
Now, at that point, did you have information that Mr. Thomas's vehicle might have driven through backyards?
Yes.
All right. May I approach the witness, Your Honor, with what's been marked as State's Exhibit O? It's been shown to counsel.
You may. Yes, sir.
Detective Cadiz, I'm going to hand these up to you. It's Composite O, 2 maps. Take a look at the maps, please, and tell me if you recognize the images or locations depicted on them.
I do.
And what locations are depicted on them?
This is the Royal Oaks Apartments where Captain Carter was shot at, where Lloyd's vehicle was initially found. The apartment complex runs east to west. On the south side of the apartment complex is the wooden fence that was driven through, and then the residential neighborhood, and directly east, northeast is Brookside, where the Passat was recovered.
And the second map, I believe, is just a sort of a road map as opposed to a satellite image?
Correct.
Otherwise the same?
Yes, sir.
Do they fairly and accurately depict the locations that you know within the city of Orlando?
They do.
Your Honor, may I ask the court to admit State's Exhibit O as, I want to say, State's 15?
Any objections?
Can I see the second one?
So this is going to be a composite exhibit?
It is a composite of 2 maps, yes, Your Honor.
No objection.
All right, this will be received without objection as State's Exhibit number 15, composite exhibit consisting of 2 maps.
Your Honor, may I have the detective step down to use the maps?
Yes, and if we could hand him a microphone, please. Thank you.
All right, so we'll start with the satellite map. If you could basically, I hate to ask you to do it, describe, hold on, I'm going to give you the laser pointer, because if you stand next to it, you're going to stand in front of the jurors. Little green button, all right? If you could describe the locations that you just did, so now using the map so that they can see.
So this road right here is Pine Hills Road, and this is where Captain Carter, just to the south of the map is North Lane. Captain Carter was coming southbound down Pine Hills Road. He sees Mr. Loyd's vehicle going northbound. He looped around. As he looped around, his red and blue lights, emergency lights are activated at that time. When he comes around, he spots the vehicle going into it's not Highland Oaks, what's it?
I believe it's Royal.
Royal Oaks. Pulls into Royal Oaks Apartments. The vehicle comes to a quick stop on one of the initial parking spaces, and that's where the shooting initially occurs. The apartment complex is surrounded by wooden slat fencing, and there's a grassy area on the south side of the apartment complex. Captain Carter reported that Mr. Loyd ran on the south side of the complex, and the carjacking occurred in the very east end, southeast corner of the complex. The VW Passat, once it was taken, drove through one of the wooden slat fences, through a couple of these backyards into the residential neighborhood, and was recovered in the apartment complex, Brookside Apartments, up here off of Cinder Lane.
And we've been publishing map number 1 of Composite 15. I don't know if that helps you at all, just to show some of the routes that could have been taken from one location to the other.
Yes. So again, this is all residential back roads, so any number of these roads could have been taken. There was no video or witness statements on which roads he took to get there. Surrounding units that were looking all over, and Brookside Apartments had come out over the radio that he had some prior encounters at Brookside, so officers did travel to that location and attempt to find him, and that's when they spotted the VW. And the VW had a good bit of front end damage as it drove through the fence, so it was pretty apparent pretty quickly.
Okay, you can have a seat again, Detective. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
So you already described that law enforcement officers went to that apartment complex in search of Mr. Loyd, and that's when they found the vehicle?
Yes, sir.
Once the vehicle was found, was there a larger search of the apartment complex to see if Mr. Loyd was still present?
Yes, and multiple units responded to Brookside, and including K-9 units and Orange County Bloodhounds also responded.
Was one of the units a Paul Foster, a K-9 named Paul Foster?
Yes, Orlando Police K-9 Officer Paul Foster.
Are you aware of whether they were able to identify or locate anything of evidentiary value at the apartment complex?
Yeah, so the Bloodhounds tracked from the vehicle to a particular building in the apartment complex. Perimeter units were set up around that building, and Paul Foster was one of the perimeter units. He located a pile of, not a pile, but some rolled up clothing, and that was a camouflage pair of pants and the black security shirt that was identified in the video.
Now, other than locating that clothing, was anything else related to Markeith Loyd found that morning at the apartment complex?
There was not.
Is it a fair statement that following those revelations at that location, the trail went cold?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, no one reported seeing Mr. Loyd, a verified report of seeing Mr. Loyd for the next 8 days.
That is correct.
And that's despite the fact that there was a lot of law enforcement officers looking for him.
Multiple agencies, multiple officers.
Can you tell us the next date that law enforcement was able to locate Markeith Loyd?
That would have been January 17th at around 6 p.m.
And how were you notified that a possible location for Mr. Loyd had been found on the evening of January 17th?
So Corporal Mareshi and myself were at the Emergency Operations Center, the EOC. There was multiple officers there. It was kind of a not a very conducive to work environment. So we agreed to move over to the electronic surveillance team building, which was part of FDLE. While we were there, there was communications coming from the various wiretaps that were going on. And one of the Orlando Police homicide detectives, Mike Fields, was at the wiretap room, and he called us and said, hey, we're hearing a voice, and one of the people here who has had dealings with Mr. Loyd believes it's Mr. Loyd on the phone, and we homed in on that particular phone.
Was there eventually a specific residence referenced, an address?
So as soon as we heard that voice on the wiretap, there was directional finders that were put out, and it moved to the address of 1157 Lescott Lane, which is over in Carver Shores.
Was law enforcement eventually ever able to locate Mr. Loyd that evening?
Apprehension officers moved to that address. They surrounded that house, saw movement inside.
So that's a yes. He was.
That is a
found.
yes, sorry.
That's okay. Were you present when he was arrested?
I was not.
Do you know if Deputy Chuck Ashworth was?
I don't know Deputy Ashworth.
That's all the questions I have, Judge. Thank you, sir.
Cross.
Yeah, please, thank you.
Yep.
Good morning, Detective.
Good morning.
You would agree with me that anytime there's a scene that's being investigated and there's active evidence that someone from crime scene will be assigned or sent to process that scene.
The priority would be securing the scene, but once the scene is secured, the detective would go out and the crime scene investigator would typically go out with that investigator.
Okay. And you're aware who the crime scene officer was that processed Captain Carter's scene, correct?
Captain Carter's scene?
Yes.
I believe I sent Karen Livengood out there
Okay.
to assist.
And she would have taken pictures and collected evidence?
Yes, sir.
Right? Okay. Now, you indicated that there were wiretaps that were recorded. Is that right?
I did.
And did you listen to any of the wiretaps?
I did not.
You indicated a gentleman by the name of Detective Fields.
Mike Fields, yes, sir.
He's from your department,
He's OPD homicide, yes, sir.
and he was involved in the process of the wiretap that was being conducted.
The process, Detective Mareshi was writing all the Title III wiretap applications.
Okay.
Detective Fields was acting basically as our liaison at the building where the wiretaps were being received.
Okay. And so when you say Mareshi was doing the Title III, what you're talking about is in order for them to record phone conversations, there has to be an authorization by a judge.
It's a warrant for a wiretap, yes, sir.
Okay. And that is a standard protocol in the law that has to be followed, correct?
Correct.
And so Mareshi was doing that on a semi-regular basis because there are requirements in regards to wiretaps that at a certain time you have to get permission again from the judge. Is that right?
That's correct.
And Mareshi is now retired. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you said there was some process, and I don't want to get into the secrecy of the process, but there's some process that allows your department to track the phone of Mr. Loyd to a location. Is that correct?
There's, the wiretap basically is a live feed where you're listening to the communications. There's pen registries where once you establish a phone number, you can request a pen registry for that phone. That'll give you actually geographic locations for where that phone is being utilized. There's cellular historical warrants, which would give you the prior numbers called. So all of those were being obtained during the apprehension phase.
Right, and there's another item that's used by police called Stingray.
I believe county was using, I don't know if we use that. I don't believe OPD uses that.
That's used to track a location from the phone.
Do you have
Correct.
your mic on, Mr. Linneman? Because I'm really having trouble hearing.
Probably not, Judge. Sorry. And you said you did not actually go down to the location, is that correct?
Not at the time. After the interview, I went down to because I had written the search warrant for the house. So we met with Judge Loudon, had the search warrant signed, and then went to the house to execute the search warrant.
And like you mentioned with the Carter scene, there was a CSI person involved in collecting evidence.
And I couldn't hear the first part of the question.
I said, like you indicated with the Carter scene, at the Les Scott Lane scene, there was a CSI collecting evidence, photographing, so forth and so on, correct?
Correct, CSI Ed Vandenberg.
Now, at the time, you had talked about how extensive the investigation was in terms of trying to find Mr. Loyd, correct?
The apprehension, yes, sir.
You are not aware personally, because you weren't involved, with what occurred prior to Lieutenant Clayton's death in terms of trying to find Mr. Loyd on the Dixon case.
That's correct. Orange County has their own apprehension unit, and we weren't involved in that aspect of it.
So the first time you really became involved, at least as the lead detective, in seeing what was going on, was after Lieutenant Clayton's.
That is correct.
And there was a joint task force which included something called MBI. Is that right?
MBI is typically, that's the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigations, and that is a Central Florida task force, and they typically will do all the wiretaps.
And there was also federal agencies involved, correct?
That's correct.
And as part of your understanding of the investigation, you are aware that there was a federal warrant issued for Mr. Loyd's Facebook material, correct?
I had heard about it, but that wasn't part of my investigation, so I heard that third hand.
Okay. And since you had heard about it, had you reviewed any of it?
I did not.
So you've never reviewed the material, the Facebook material that was collected by the federal agency?
That's correct.
Now, during this time, well, prior to, I guess you wouldn't know this, so from the time that Lieutenant Clayton was killed up to the point where Mr. Loyd was arrested, there was a huge amount of press on the search for Mr. Loyd. Is that correct?
A huge amount of media attention?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And obviously you're aware of that as a lead detective. You're seeing and hearing it whenever you're in front of a TV or reading a newspaper or something, correct?
Yes. During the time, I wasn't really watching the news or reading the paper, but I was aware that yes, there was a significant media attention.
And you're also aware that during that time, your chief of police, Mena, had made multiple...
Objection, relevance.
Sustain.
Now, you're aware that there was a reward posted, correct?
For Mr. Loyd's arrest, yes.
Okay, that was, I think, $100,000?
I believe so. I wasn't part of that.
Okay. And that money is coordinated by a separate agency that has nothing to do with the OPD?
Objection to the relevance.
Sustain.
Now, you said you listened to the wiretap conversations, I think? I wasn't sure if you did.
No, I did
you
not.
did not. Did you discuss with Mareshi whether he listened to them?
I didn't discuss that, and whenever you go to the wiretap room, there's a sign-in process. You basically are treated as a witness, and so you don't just casually go into the wiretap room. I don't believe Corporal Mareshi ever entered that wiretap room. I couldn't say, you'd have to ask him, but he never did in my presence.
So I see you have a big notebook in front of you.
Yes, sir.
What is that?
So this is just a ring binder it's a study guide that I have my supplement report, transcripts from our deposition, a couple of transcripts from various interviews, the crime scene photos, that sort of thing, just a quick reference for court preparation.
Okay, and as the lead detective, do you go through, as part of your duties, and review all the reports from other officers or detectives that were involved in your investigation?
So just to clarify the answer, there was two independent investigations going on. There was the homicide investigation and the apprehension investigation. As part of the apprehension, no, I was not going over the reports that people were involved in on the apprehension efforts. My focus was purely on the actual homicide case. So I would not have involved myself with the various reports going on that were being obtained by the other agencies and as part of the apprehension efforts.
But you're aware that Mareshi was kind of like your co-lead during this investigation. Would that be fair to say?
Yes and no. He was the first couple of days. Corporal Mareshi was very much involved with me. The more he got involved in writing the Title IIIs and so forth, the more he separated himself. So for instance, there was a number of interviews that I did with other detectives from the homicide unit because Corporal Mareshi was busy doing his aspect of the investigation.
So what you're saying is that it wasn't important to you what Mr. Loyd said on those wiretap conversations as far as you knew in your investigation, correct?
That's correct.
And how could you tell that if you didn't listen to him?
How could I tell?
Whether they're important or not?
What would it be saying that was pertaining to the homicide investigation?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. And it wouldn't be pertinent because it was after the fact.
Okay. Now, Detective Mareshi actually wrote a report about that. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware Detective Mareshi wrote a report, yes, sir.
And it's your testimony you never reviewed that report.
I have a copy of the report. As far as review it, I believe I read it once.
Okay. And in that report is the wiretap conversation transcription.
I went over the report. It's not a report I studied. It's a report I obtained, but it was not a report I studied.
So you're telling this jury you looked at a report written by one of your own detectives who was initially involved in a big part of the investigation, but then went over to wiretaps, and there was conversations between Mr. Loyd and other people, and you don't remember what was said.
It's not that I don't remember, it's that I didn't review it. It wasn't part of my investigation. It didn't pertain to the homicide, and I was focused on the homicide aspect, so I did not involve myself in the apprehension efforts at all.
But a few moments ago, you said you reviewed it once.
I looked at it. I did not study it, is what I said.
So when you say you look at it, you just look at it and toss it aside, or do you actually look at the words that are written in that paper and document?
So if when I say I study a document, that will mean I go over it multiple times. I will probably write notes on the document. I will probably ask questions to the author of the document. When I say I study it, that's what I mean. When I say I quickly read something, that's about it. And it's nothing that is committed to memory after that.
All right. So do you pick and choose on the level of the damage that a document may do to your investigation, not to study it and just kind of purview it?
I'm not sure what damage was done to my investigation from the apprehension efforts.
Well, you wouldn't know because you didn't read it, right?
I know because my homicide investigation was conducted and there was no damage that came forward from any outside sources.
And this was conversation between multiple parties besides Mr. Loyd, wasn't it?
This was which conversations?
The wiretap conversations.
Again, I wasn't part of the wiretap conversations, so I have no idea what was being discussed on those wiretaps.
So you completely blanked out on what's in that report.
Objection asked and answered.
Sustained. Move on.
You would agree with the detective, when you do an investigation, you want to be thorough?
Of course.
You want to be fair?
Of course.
You want to cover everything that may be important to you?
I want to cover everything that's pertinent to the homicide investigation.
You don't have tunnel vision, right?
I don't have tunnel vision. However, when there's multiple aspects and multiple investigations happening at one time, you do have to remain focused as to what is pertaining to your particular investigation. And you can't allow yourself to go down the rabbit holes of various other investigations.
So you decide what a rabbit hole is. Would
I'm
that
sorry?
be fair? You decide what a rabbit hole is.
Yes, as the investigator, you have to determine what is pertinent to the investigation and what is not.
And so when we were talking the other day about you intentionally leaving out the one photograph, screenshot, that showed Mr. Loyd unarmed and running around that pole at Walmart for the shooting, was that a rabbit hole?
No, it was so the entire video is submitted to your office, to the state attorney's office. There was nothing that was left out. All the video that we obtained was submitted to you. As far as leaving anything out, there's nothing that was left out. There were still frames that I obtained that were basically same as my notes, same as my supplement report, that were basically aids to the narrative that I was submitting.
And you left out the one still frame of those 15, I guess it should have been 16, that would have depicted Mr. Loyd unarmed before the shootout, correct?
So again, and we've talked about this before, the still frames were a very insignificant part. It was almost just a quick reference for myself. The video itself was, I feel, the most pertinent evidence submitted of that day, and there was obvious video of Mr. Loyd showing him armed, showing him unarmed. So it's basically up to the reader to determine what was pertinent.
But I'm still trying to understand. The first thing you did with this video is broke it down into 15 different photographs. From the time that, I guess, the first photograph you showed was Mr. Loyd with his gun drawn, moving in the direction of Lieutenant Clayton, correct?
Correct.
And then the last still that you showed was the end when he was shooting down as he was leaving.
So, correct. So the stills that you're referring to, the order of those stills you presented. I presented 15 photographs in my case packet when I submitted it to the state attorney. How they were shown is, yeah, they were in time sequence. But yes, I was investigating a shooting of a police officer, so obviously I'm going to show the person that is shooting the police officer. I would feel that would be a pertinent photograph.
So you didn't want to go down the rabbit hole that possibly Lieutenant Clayton may have shot first.
I didn't consider that to be a rabbit hole. I believe 3 different times, Detective Mareshi and I went back to the Walmart to see, as I was reviewing the video, and frame by frame, I said, hey, let's go back out to the Walmart. I want to see if any of her rounds struck the building, because her firing angle, while it was she was firing straight up, so I didn't think it was necessarily plausible that she struck the building. I wanted to make sure. So once everybody was cleared, the scene was cleared, and we could go out and spend some time on that building, yeah, I went and checked and did not see any impacts on the building from bullet strikes.
So it's your testimony that you looked at the wall, which would have been behind Mr. Loyd, going towards the other side of the Walmart, and saw no strikes. Your testimony?
My testimony, our focus, when I looked at the video, my focus was actually on the upper part of the Walmart and the pillars. I felt that if she had fired off a round towards the building, that's where it would have struck based on the video of her firing from her back. As far as and I know you had found an impact on a windowsill that we couldn't say is relevant or not. I can't say that specifically we checked that windowsill to say that there was no impacts, but my search was based on the video of where she may have impacted the building, and I did not see any strikes at that point.
It's actually a concrete wall that's behind, which is on the Walmart.
Right. There's concrete wall, but there's windows with an aluminum frame would be in the trajectory path of Lieutenant Clayton.
And it's your testimony you didn't check those?
That I didn't?
Did not or did?
We checked them. We did not specifically check the window sills. Again, I based my search on the likely trajectory path based on the video.
I have no further questions.
Redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to clarify something. The term unarmed has been used on several occasions. How are you defining unarmed when that's used? Well, Mr. Lenneman referenced a moment when Mr. Loyd was unarmed.
And I don't know when he would have been unarmed. It's pretty obvious that he was armed once he left his vehicle and entered the Walmart. There was no time that he go back to his vehicle that we could see. So he would have been armed throughout the time he was walking through the Walmart, throughout his time as he approached Lieutenant Clayton, and obviously at the time he drew his firearm.
In other words, armed means there's a firearm on your person.
Yes.
Okay, that's all. Thank you, Judge.
May this witness be excused for today.
He's actually coming back this afternoon, but he's
Okay.
excused for now. Yes, Your Honor.
You can step down, Detective.
Thank you, Judge.
You're still under subpoena.
Yes, ma'am.
Subject to recall. Call your next witness.
State calls Gary Crosby.
Just go to the front step, raise your right hand, okay, face it back.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, sir, if you'll have a seat and take your mask off.
Okay.
please. Thank you. You may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, could you tell us your full name, please, and spell your last name?
Gary Crosby, Crosby.
Where are you currently employed, sir?
The Orlando Police Department,
How long have you been a member of the Orlando Police Department?
almost 22 years.
And what is it that you currently do with the Orlando Police Department?
Crime scene investigator,
How long have you worked as a crime scene investigator for the Orlando Police Department?
the entire time I've been there.
All right, so that's been the entirety of your career has been in that role.
Yes, sir.
All right. Were you employed and on duty with the Orlando Police Department back on Monday, January 9th of 2017?
Yes, I was.
That afternoon, on two separate occasions, did you respond to 5365 Cinder Lane Parkway, commonly known as the Brookside Apartments at that time?
Yes, sir, I did.
Do you recall approximately what time it was that you responded the first time during the day?
It was at 12:20 in the afternoon.
All right? And what was the purpose of your response to that apartment complex the first time?
In reference to a carjacking vehicle.
In other words, was it your understanding that the vehicle had been located?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with number 2 of State's Composite 15?
You may.
So the jurors have already seen this. Excuse me, Mr. Crosby,
Okay.
I'm going to hold it up. Do you see the location that you responded to on the map?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right, and could you point to it for everybody, please?
It's right up here in this area.
All right, can you generally describe the apartment complex, what it looks like and how it's laid out?
It was, the building I went to faced the north, and it was like a 2-level apartment complex with parking in the front.
All right, when you arrived at the apartment complex, were you directed to the suspected vehicle of the victim?
Yes, I was.
Did you take photographs of it?
Yes, sir, I did.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness to what's been marked as State's Composite P? It's a 6-photograph composite. It's been shown to counsel.
Ken?
Mr. Crosby, I'm handing you State's Composite P. Could you look at all 6 photographs and tell me when you've had a chance to do that?
Okay.
Do you recognize the images depicted in the photos?
I do.
And what do you recognize them to be?
That is the silver Volkswagen that was involved in the carjacking in front of the apartment complex.
Do they fairly and accurately depict the vehicle as you found it that day?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I'd ask the court to admit State's Composite P as State's 16.
Any objection? All right, this will be admitted without objection to State's Composite 16, consisting of 6 photographs, sequentially numbered.
Permission to publish State 16, Your Honor?
Granted.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, Mr. Crosby, the images should appear on the screen in front of you if the technology is cooperating this morning. All right, it is. So I'm now publishing number 1 of State's Composite 16. Could you just tell us what we're looking at in that photograph?
That's just an overall view of the front of the vehicle that the silver Volkswagen that was backed into front of the apartment complex.
And I was going to ask you about that. So the rear of the vehicle with the tag is now facing the inside, so it's not visible from the road. Is that right?
That's correct.
Was that the way you found it?
It is.
All right. Do you see, we'll show some other pictures in a moment, but can you see some damage on the vehicle?
Yes, sir, there.
Can you describe where the damage was that you located?
It had damage to the right front corner, the right front bumper area, the left front headlight was busted out and had some lower front end damage. And I believe that was it. Oh, the right front tire was also flat.
Okay, so I'm going to publish photograph number 2 of State 16. It's a close-up image. You can see the damage you were describing. Photograph number 3. Why did you take that photograph, sir?
Just to depict the overall of the passenger side of the vehicle.
It looks like the passenger side window was down or partially down, is that right?
It was, yes.
And I'll ask it a better way. Did you touch or change or move this vehicle at all before you took the photos we're looking at?
No, sir, did not.
Publishing 4 of state 16. Publishing 5 of state 16. And which headlight is that, sir?
That's the left headlight.
And 6 of state 16. Now, you ended up responding back to that same apartment complex later that afternoon, is that right?
Yes, I did.
I said afternoon, it was actually evening. Could you tell us the time that you responded back?
It was at 7:16 p.m.
And when you went back the second time, what was the purpose of your visit?
And it was in reference to a search warrant.
Did you help execute the search warrant?
I was there, but I did not do any of the searching. I was just there to photograph and collect evidence.
Right? Were you eventually directed to the rear patio of the apartment where the search warrant was being executed?
Yes, sir, I was.
And did you take photographs of what you found there?
I did.
Can you generally describe what it was or what it is that you found there?
I photographed two clothing articles. One was a black T-shirt with a security road across the front of it, I believe, and a pair of camouflage pants.
Did you collect the pants and the black shirt?
I did.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness of what's been marked as State's Exhibits AO and AP? They've both been shown to counsel.
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to hand you some scissors, Mr. Crosby.
Yes, sir.
Before you open it, can you tell me, looking at AO, if you recognize that exhibit?
I do.
And how do you recognize the package?
My handwriting, my description, and my initials are here, and the date is there.
And what did you document is inside that package?
One black short sleeve pullover shirt, size extra large, with security logo across the front and back.
All right. Now I'm going to hand you State's Exhibit AP. Same set of questions. Do you recognize that package?
I do.
And do you recognize your signature and handwriting on it?
I do.
And what do you know or believe is inside that package?
It's one pair of camouflage pants.
Right? Do those packages appear to be in the same or substantially same condition as they were when they left your custody, but for having gone to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
Yes, sir, they do.
All right. Your Honor, at this time, I'd ask the court to admit State's Exhibits AO and AP as the next numbered exhibits.
All right. AO will be admitted without objection as exhibit number 17. AP will be admitted without objection as exhibit number 18. Both for the state.
Mr. Crosby, there are some gloves to your left. Your Honor, may I have the witness open State's Exhibit AO
Yes.
and publish it to the jury?
Yes. You have permission on both exhibits.
Thank you, Your Honor. Are they the wrong size? Or you...
No, I'm good.
Okay. Some scissors. If you could open up the package, look inside, verify that in fact the black security shirt is in there.
Yes, sir, it is.
Would you mind if I take a look? Yes, sir. So would you mind opening it up, pulling it out, and just holding it up for members of the jury, please? Would you mind standing, please, sir, so everyone can see you? Thank you, sir. If you wouldn't mind repackaging that for me, I would really appreciate it. You referenced some photographs that you took of that item and the pants a moment ago. I'll go ahead and collect the shirt from you. Thank you, sir. Okay. Thank you. Your Honor, may I approach the witness of what's been marked as State's Exhibit Composite Q? It's 8 photographs.
You may?
Been shown to counsel. Mr. Crosby, I'm showing you State's Composite Q. Could you look at the photos and tell me if you recognize the images depicted in them?
Yes, sir, I recognize them.
And what do you recognize the images to be of?
It's of the clothing articles at the apartment before they were collected and photographs after they were collected.
And that, so when you say that includes the shirt that you just showed us all.
That's correct.
Do they fairly and accurately depict the way they were sitting and then the way that you positioned them on the evening of January 9th of 2017?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, that's the court to admit State's Exhibit Q as
19. Any objection? All right, this will be admitted without objection as State's Composite Exhibit number 19, consisting of 8 sequentially numbered photographs.
And I don't have any other questions, Your Honor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
May this witness be excused.
He is excused and released by the state. Yes, Judge.
Defense. All right, thank you, sir. You're free
you,
to
ma'am.
go. How are the jurors holding up? You need a break? Yep, all right. Let's take a 10-minute break. Thanks. Before we call our next witness. Court's in recess, 10 minutes.